You may ask, what is fake news? Well, there are many different definitions of what people think fake news is. Fake news has been around since the birth of our nation or since the beginning of time. It is an epidemic that our world and nation are facing, especially since the age of the internet, where just about anyone can broadcast something via the internet using their phone or even a camera with Wi-Fi. We will hear different interviews with different answers of what people think fake news is. There will be a news director who will give us his professional opinion on what fake news is, and there will also be a college professor who teaches political science at Pikes Community College, and other interviews to tell us what they feel fake news is.
All right, with all the propaganda of fake news is going around, how do you distinguish what is fake news and what is not, and how do you keep yourself from being a victim of fake news?
Well, what I would say is that you being a victim of a fake news, that's bad though. So for you to know which one is the good news and the bad news, for you to go through CNN and watch TV, you have to be like, what is the good news? Because there's some parts of news that they're always lying though. And there's some bad news that they always say the true part of it. So let's say the good news and the bad news, both are on the same side. So we can't differentiate which one is bad or good because we are just listening to the news, we don't know what's happening. Yeah.
Getting it from another outside source, someone that's more international, like another country or another newscast. So.
We've researched to ask that hard question, what is fake news? The simple answer is anything that prompts propaganda and something that is not true. We went and asked a news director at a local Colorado Springs television station and a college professor, and this is what they had to say.
Fake news is anything that hasn't been researched, that that is not fact. That would be my definition of fake news. I think it's easier to talk about, what is real news, right? Because there are a lot of different outlets out there now who, whether they're leaning partisan one way, whether they're leaning partisan the other way, if they're trying to influence, in my opinion, that's fake news, right? That's commentary. That's not, you're not giving both sides, and you're not being fair to whoever it is, to whoever the newsmaker is or the subject of the, of the report.
Fake news is the process by which we decide to accept or not accept information. It's also, historically, we've had that. It's nothing necessarily new today. But fake news sometimes is, a lot of people and a lot of scholars tend to associate fake news with the concept that you are distorting facts for special benefit that you might or someone else can benefit from that distortion of fact. Also, a number of scholars, particularly in political science today, are starting to use or analyzing the term fake news to sort of explain the fact that you might be hiding also information. So it's not just the fact that you are distorting the information, but also hiding information. Information that's not available to the public, that could be information that could be useful for decision making, let's say for voters or whatever, might be the particular situation that the country's in at that particular moment. But that's one of the issues that sometimes we are also starting to see today. We have distortion, and we have sort of hiding of news, and we actually have the replacing of news. So that's another element that we also have in today's environment, that we are replacing sort of what's factual or this, with other types of information that might not be actually real. That's not real fact, or that's not something that really happened. There's no evidence even to support that, for example. So that's sort of where the three parts to it tend to, what we see today as most variance in the fake news sort of environment.
We've heard from the news director and college professor. What do you think? Do you have a clear understanding of fake news? Let's take a look at news coverage about a Vietnam veteran. We are not going to give you any details about the news coverage, but can you tell if it's fake or real news coverage? After we watch it, we will come back and let you know what the answer is to the news.
Garofalo is used to working under pressure. The Vietnam War veteran served 7 years as a member of the nation's first Navy SEAL team. He was awarded 22 commendations, including 2 Purple Hearts. You are a hero, but like most heroes,
I don't like to hear that.
You don't like to hear it. Why don't you like to hear it?
Heroes are the ones that didn't come home.
So, after watching the news coverage of the veteran, do you think it's real or fake? If you answer it is fake, you are correct. The reason why it is fake is because this person lied about being in the Vietnam War. He was never a Navy SEAL during that time. Even though the news station did not know this at the time, it was still false.
I think as a news director, it's vetting. It is making sure that, hey, this is what this person said. It's the checks and balances that we have in the newsroom of producers or a news director or someone like that reading over a reporter's script and saying, hey, did you ask this question? Hey, did you talk about this? If you did, why is this not in your story? So, I think it goes back to having the public's interest in mind. One of the things that I talk about with our newsroom all the time is that we're in the business of public service, no different than police, fire, ambulance drivers, and so our job every day is to come in here and is to serve the people of Southern Colorado. And if you're taking that stance every day, then I think that you're going to weed out any fake news or bias in a story that might pop up.
Over the years, society has relied on the news for information that is going on around the world. Many people think that society is not affected by fake news or any other type of news. So, do you think that fake news affects society? Well, in our opinion, fake news does affect society. It can affect society in a lot of different ways, and it mainly affects society in political views.
Fake news is an issue. If you look back at the history of journalism, what we've kind of fallen back into is the yellow journalism, is the muckrakers. And while good things came out of that, at the same time, it deteriorated the public's trust in what we do, having credible news is very important to a democratic society. In the republic that we live in, without a trust and credibility in the media, in the Fourth Estate, then what you have is the opportunity for government and public officials to run wild. And what we're seeing now is a debate not over facts but over opinions, right? And that is very dangerous to the republic.
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish things aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Well, we've had fake news for a long time. Since military, if you look at military, for example, and what we might be receiving, and historically, right? From Roman times, from the Greek times, all the way to today. The way in which, for example, Abraham Lincoln as president used to frame at times the evolution of the Civil War, right? Who was in the front, how far did the Southern troops had moved north, for example. Sometimes that was distorted. And sometimes he used to try to calm the public by giving distorted information about really how far advancing troops had been made northward. So we've had that. How does that affect the public? I'm sure it affected public opinion at the time and gave some comfort to the average person on the ground. We've also had examples of fake news, sort of what the terminology we would use today. During the Vietnam War would be another example of how the government would not allow some information to get out, how some types of information we've had actually was films that films, meaning documentaries, were banned from being in the public during that period because, you know, it would show what really was happening on the ground, and that would put in jeopardy the construction of the war that the government had. So if the government sometimes wants to construct the war in a certain way for the public, there are certain things that we are not allowed to see or not allowed to have information on. During the Iraq War, during 2004 and 2005 onward, the Department of Defense would not allow, for example, the U.S. press to actually come in and film and document the arrival of troops who had passed. Sort of the caskets come in with the flags over them, and that was not available to the U.S. public. If you wanted that information, you'd have to go get it from The Guardian, Der Spiegel, BBC News, Le Monde, or some other forum. Al Jazeera used to have this information, but we did not. There is sort of a control of information that actually leads for the government to, at times, post forward fake news about what really is happening on the ground.
We all have been victims of fake news. You may ask, how can we protect ourselves from fake news? To be honest, there's no real way to protect ourselves in today's environment. We asked the news director and college professor how society can protect themselves from fake news, and this is what they had to say about the matter.
Spotting fake news, it's all about media literacy. It's all about knowing the source. It's all about knowing the bias that source brings to the table. And so I think, you know, I would advocate for media literacy, especially in the society that we live in today, you know, where you've got 12-year-olds with social media accounts. I think that, you know, as early as elementary school to junior high, we should be teaching media literacy. You know, that's going to be the only way to spot fake news is through educating folks on media literacy. That's, you know, it's through education, man.
We have grown skeptics of the information that we are given, and most of my colleagues, students, friends, they don't trust what they are given. So cross-referencing information is essential, I think. But you need to be careful.
We all remember the big uproar during the elections on fake news. It seemed like every station was being accused of being fake news.
Fake news. CNN, fake.
There were also rumors throughout the election that some say affected the outcome of the election. We went and asked the college professor who teaches political science and asked her hard questions. Does fake news affect politics and political views? And let's look and hear what she has to say about the matter.
I think it's very generational, right? So you have a generation of consumers of news and of voters that are much more skeptic about what's available to them. So the millennial generation and the upcoming Z generation, these individuals, so the Z generation has just barely started. There will be most of them voting next year, at the next year general elections. Some of them have voted in 2018 midterm congressional elections. So this is a brand new generation that we are tracking, as well as the millennials. And they're very skeptic about the forms of information that they are getting. They don't trust everything, and they know, for the most part, at least my students get to know, that some of the information that they are receiving, it's tailored to them due to their preferences and logarithms that have been put into apps or into their phone or whatever, or, you know, cookies that we have on our computers and our Google searches. So this particular generation tends to be much more skeptic about what they are consuming. Previous generations, baby boomers, you know, Y generation, X generation, etc. Previous generations tend to take what they get. So for example, what happened recently with the vaccination, right? The vaccination sort of scandal, so to speak, really was fake news, what was posted on Facebook. And a few people, few mothers, so non-millennial generation, a few of the mothers and grandmothers of this generation started to look into what was given to them as information, which was erroneous information, and they decided to not vaccinate their children, which led to all kinds of epidemics of childhood illnesses in parts of the country, in part because of what they were given was incorrect information. If you look at Cambridge Analytica and what they have put out in social media as news, being literally fake news, affected not only our elections in 2016, but also Brexit earlier than that. In 2015, they're already influencing voters in England on the Brexit issue. So people get to be skeptical about what they consume, but it's generational. Some people will take at face value what they are being provided, particularly on Facebook and other social media. If you are a wiser consumer and you can say that, oh, I'm cross-referencing this news that I got on Facebook with printed media, with television, different sources, and you cross that, let's say, with not only the media in the United States, but media abroad. Let's say if you get something on Fox News, you get something on CNN, you get something on CBS, as an example, can you cross that information with information coming out of Spain or coming out of Brazil, whatever is, cross-check the information to see how accurate and how it's being reported elsewhere to facilitate that. Older generations, if they are really well educated, they tend to do that. Less educated individuals tend to not do that. So education and age play a huge role in that.
There are also different types of fake news. There is deliberate misinformation, false headlines, social media sharing, and satire, which is news or comedy news, often starts with some form of truth and they turn it around on society. This type of fake news can be viewed as bad news by any who do not understand the humor of the nature. When reading a news article or catching a newscast, ask yourself these 3 questions when you listen and read the news article. Who's the creator? Do you know the person who's reporting the article or news? Are they reputable? What is the message? Does the story come up numerous searches? What is the content of the message? Why was it created? What is the motivation of the article? Is the purpose of the article for profit? We heard from our friends, Ryan and Elise, about what they think and feel fake news is. Can you spot fake news?
Thomas Jefferson said that, question with boldness, even the very existence of God. For if there is a God, he shall surely appreciate your homage for reason over blindfolded fear. And that's, and that's the way that we should approach, reporting news on a daily basis. We should, question with boldness everything that's put out there, because everyone has an agenda, right? Everyone's coming to something with an agenda or with their own bias, and it's that questioning with boldness that is, that weeds out those things, that weeds out that fake news. You have to question your own beliefs on a daily basis.